We are live. Sorry. I was like, sometimes it, pauses on me. Hey, everyone. Sometimes the hardest relationships to release are not the toxic ones. They're the relationships where there was genuine love, there was no victim or no villain in the story. The ones where you cared deeply for each other, but something still wasn't aligned. Tonight's message is about understanding the difference between love, attachment, compatibility, peace, and alignment. Hey, loves, welcome back to another episode of You Were Meant for More. I'm your host, Francina Ayala, and we are about to hop into one of the hardest conversations I've had on this show. But I think it's really important to understand because I know a lot of people go through this type of process in their lives, and I've been through it myself, so I definitely understand the emotions that are around it. And so I want to be able to be here to support you if you're currently going through it, if you haven't gone through it, but you are in a situation or you feel like it's happening. I'm going to have some questions at the end of the show to kind of help guide you to more of an understanding of where you could be in a current relationship. Okay. So we're talking about the relationships where love wasn't the problem. There was love, there was care, there were those good moments, there was the laughter, there were the dreams, and yet it still wasn't meant to continue. And that can be one of the hardest realities to accept because it isn't either one of them that's toxic. It's easier when someone treats you badly. It's easier when there's like a clear reason that you have to leave, basically. But what do you do when the person is good? And I've gotten this from a couple people, like, how do I leave when I know that this person is genuinely a good person? So if you've been there, let me know, tell me you're here, ask any questions along the way. I'm here for you. But basically, you still know they aren't your future, okay? And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So, hey everyone, I'm back. So I just want to know, did Italy do me good? Do I look good? I was gone for 2 weeks. So I want to make sure that you guys all know. Did you go back and watch like previous episodes and catch up to what our topic is now going forward? I'm just curious. Let me know if you're joining me live or if you're catching me on replay. I would love to hear what you have in store or what's happening with you right now. But yeah, if you've ever been in this situation, let me know. Been there, understand, here with you, whatever it may be. So, or just come along and hear what it is that, breaks down this area so I can help guide you through it. Or maybe somebody that's gone through this process. All right. So I still haven't had a chance to post all my adventures from the trip. But if you follow me on Instagram or Facebook, you saw a lot of the stories. And then I still haven't bundled them all together, and I will. I'll do it on all the platforms, mostly IG and Facebook, because that's where I'm most active. And I might be giving TikTok a chance this year. We'll see. I don't know. But all right. So this episode is hard, but I want to make sure you're all supported. Okay. So I'm gonna be with you with empathy. Okay. Okay, so why this relationship hurts so much if you've gone through it? The relationships that often hurt the most aren't the ones we've had. They're they're basically the ones we imagined. So we don't just grieve people, we grieve possibilities, potential, future dreams, imagine experiences, what could have been. We grieve those types of, experiences and opportunities. And sometimes you're not grieving the relationship, you're grieving the future you thought you were building together. And you imagined, like, for example, you imagined holidays together, family gatherings, future vacations, growing old together. And when the relationship ends, those dreams end too. And the pain isn't always losing the person, sometimes it's losing the possibility. And so, yeah, if you've been there and understand, let me know. Okay, so sometimes you're grieving what never actually happened. And so this is where many women get stuck, and some men, because they believe if we love each other enough, we can make it work. But the hard truth is love matters, okay? But love is not the only thing that matters. You also need communication, trust, emotional maturity, values, vision, honesty, spiritual alignment. Because love is important, but love is not a substitute for compatibility. Like I remember back in the day, I was dating someone, and he used to always say, love is enough. And I used to say, no, I'm sorry. He used to say, all you need is love. And I remember responding, love just isn't enough. So I even knew back then, and that was probably like 15 years ago, that although you love someone, it's not enough to sustain a relationship long term if you're not compatible in certain areas. And the thing is, the relationship will suffer and it will continue to show up. There'll be resentment, there will be arguments because they're not fulfilling a need or a value that you're holding yourself to or that you have in your life, and vice versa, that you might not be holding the value that they have in their life. And then cheating starts occurring, and then speaking to other people because, and I'm not saying everybody does it. I know my people don't. But that's where relationships start going into turmoil. They're looking for that validation where they're not getting it inside the relationship. So you can love someone who wants different things, communicates differently, lives differently, handles conflict differently, views life differently, and none of that makes either person wrong. And that's what's important, is that neither of it makes them wrong because they all have situations. Ah, thank you for joining. Salutations for Argentina. Awesome. Enjoy yourself, Will. I appreciate it for hopping in. Okay, so none of it makes it wrong, right? Or either person. Everyone has a standard within their life. You know, you want what's best for people, and you don't want to try to change somebody to fit your own agenda. You guys want to go into the relationship knowing you have the same core values in alignment. And so not every good person is your person. Let that land. So not every good person is your person. Okay? Love can exist where alignment doesn't. And that's where a lot of people get confused. 2 weeks ago when I was doing this live, the show was all about love or attachment. And I gave you guys a series of questions to really sit with, to understand where you were holding on to or I should say, your attachment style. And this episode, I'm just going to kind of go over some questions that are going to be reflective questions for you to, reflect upon. You can grab your journal, a paper, a pen, pencil, whatever that may look like, and just kind of sit with that, journal it, find out if that's where you're at in a relationship, if you're currently in one. But love yourself enough to know that you get to choose the love that aligns with who you are. And that's why I wanted to do today's episode, because I felt like it was a great transition from the love or attachment episode. If you haven't seen it, go back and watch that one. So why women stay so long? Let's talk about this. Honestly, many women don't stay because of love. They stay because of hope. There's this hope and potential of like, this person loves me, they adore me, they treat me well. And so I'm going to stay because I'm hoping things are going to line up. Ever feel that way? If that's you, if you've gone through that, let me know. All right, we got Rico in the house. Everyone has their guard up, and we not knowingly push the right person away without giving them the benefit of the doubt. When we heal, we feel amazing. And we don't want anyone taking that away. Yes, absolutely. So, by the way, hi. Hey, Rico. So let me go ahead and go over that again. I'm sorry, you guys. You're gonna hear me drinking water because I feel like I still have like a little bit of something from my trip. I had crazy allergies over there, and I feel like they're still affecting me. Okay, so everyone has their guard up, and we not knowingly push the right person away. Yes and no. So some people do have their guard up, definitely. And the biggest thing that I tell people is to have is communication. So I was a communications major in college, and anytime I talk to couples or I'm in a relationship with someone, I always say communication is priority. That is like one of my top value standards, that we communicate in everything that we do. And yes, we can push people away without giving them the benefit of the doubt. When we heal, we feel amazing. You're right. When we push people away, I remember in a relationship several years back, there was somebody I was interested in. And because of his own past where women continue to cheat on him, he was too afraid to dive into a new relationship. Now, granted, I know it wasn't meant for me, but I remember thinking, his past is affecting how he's moving forward in the future with someone who would never cheat. And so you got to be aware that there's a process of healing and understanding that what you're holding on to is a reflection within you. And in relationships, we tend to attract the mirror image of who we are and what we believe. And let's see what else. When we heal, we feel amazing, yes, and we don't want anyone taking that away. So I'm not really sure what you mean by we don't want anyone taking that away. When we feel amazing, we want to be with the person that's going to evolve with us in that process. Now, granted, if you have one person who is doing a lot of personal development, who is showing up in a space of like growth and elevating and all of these different areas, and you have somebody that's not, you guys are not, they're going to be in a misalignment because somebody is looking to grow and the other person isn't. And so there's just like this constant kind of pull that can happen. I've seen that in the past. And then you said, when we're in love, we become an anxious person. When we want peace, we become avoidant. I think we need to talk offline, Rico, because when we're in love, when you're in the right type of love, you're not anxious at all. And the right type of love, what I mean is the love within yourself, because so many people jump into relationships when they haven't really done the work themselves. So my previous episode was about love or attachment. And I went through this whole attachment style, like which attachment style are you? And I asked questions so that you understood. And I went through several attachment styles. Mine were like fear of abandonment. And I think it was, I forgot the last one that I was, but really understanding where you get to show up as your best self, because the self-love work is the number one priority, is how to love you. You got to work on you first before you can attract the love that you want in this life, that is going to bring you peace, joy, happiness, fulfillment. And it doesn't come with anxious vibes at all. When we want peace, we become avoidant. When we want peace, we become avoidant. I think I understand when you say that, but I think I need more of a breakdown of that. When you want peace, you become avoidant. So love is supposed to bring peace and not have any anxiousness or avoidance to it, because it allows you to be able to love who you are so that you can then project out what it is the energy wise and communication wise to the person that you are in a relationship with, that you are coming to partnership with. So there's a lot, but yeah, we'll talk more. I have a men's workshop coming soon, Rico. So if you're interested, shoot me a DM. All right, so let's go ahead and hop back in. So we're talking about why women stay because of the hope. They're hoping to, draw closer to this person. They're hoping to build a future. They're hoping for the best, right? They're hoping for a future together, traveling together. They're hoping for all kinds of different opportunities, as I mentioned in the beginning. So hope sounds something like, maybe it'll change. Maybe it'll get better. Maybe they'll grow. Maybe they'll figure it out. But eventually, you have to accept what is, not what could be. And that's where it is. Because no matter what, when you're in a relationship and they're not falling under the whole, maybe it'll change, maybe it'll get better, maybe they'll grow, maybe they'll figure it out, and months, years pass, you start resenting the person. And that's not healthy love. You're basically settling. And so this is why I want to bring this up, so that people understand that it's okay to love someone and that's not your person, and let go of the relationship. Okay. And then as you continue to evolve and love and self-love, self-heal, the self-love work, the self-worth, the forgiveness, then you're able to attract the love that it is in alignment with who you are and your expectations. Okay. So eventually you have to accept, as I mentioned, what is, not what could be. Potential is not reality. And that's where we get stuck. Oh, but they have so much potential. How many of you said that? They have potential though. Oh my goodness. They could be so good if things would be amazing if what? If insert line here. insert your value here. And that's what it is. It's like, oh, that, everything would have been perfect if, but it's like when you find yourself ifing too much, it's not alignment anymore. And so, yeah, that's where it becomes a little bit difficult. You cannot build a future on who someone might become. Okay? Let me share that again. Take it down. Write notes. You cannot build a future on who someone might become. Okay? So let me ask you guys a question. How many times have you stayed attached to someone's potential? How many times? Just for fun. Just throw out months, years, days, weeks. Now, days and weeks, you're barely starting to learn the person, okay? But, you'll understand in the, few weeks that they may not be your person. But mine, I used to stay a couple months. I remember my last relationships, I stayed a couple years. But as I was growing, I understood where each relationship had its purpose. Okay. And then I decided I'm going to stay single for 13 years. So understand that it's okay to say, okay, you know what? It's no longer working and it's no longer in alignment. So it's okay. You can always answer later. You can shoot me a DM. But the question was, how many times have you stayed attached to someone's potential? All right. So potential keeps people stuck longer than reality. Okay. Potential keeps people stuck longer than reality. And that's where it's that hope that things will change. It's that hope that things will be different. and it's all the ifs and buts. You've had those conversations with family, friends, and you're frustrated. You've had the conversation with your partner and you're still frustrated because nothing has changed. So yeah. And then hope starts to diminish and it starts to go out the door. All right. So this is where everything changed for me back when I was in relationships. I realized something. Attachment says, don't leave me. Peace says, I trust what is for me. Attachment says, I can't imagine my life without them. And peace says, I know I'll be okay. Attachment says, hold on tighter. And peace says, release with grace. I remember one time saying like, oh, that's okay. I'm not in a rush. We'll just take it day by day. And then before you know it, in a relationship, I was getting more frustrated. I was getting angrier at the person. I was starting to resent the person. I'm like, this isn't okay. I had to take a step back because even as a coach, I teach this. And I'm like, wait a second. I can still love the person and know that we're not in alignment. So yeah, that's what I want for you all. Okay, so attachment is often driven by fear. Peace is driven by trust. So let's take a look at that. One of my thought processes when I was in a previous relationship was attachment is often driven by fear. Okay, let's look at that. So I was single for 13 years, right? And previously, I was in a relationship that was like, oh, well, if I give this relationship up, then who's going to love me the way they love me? Who's going to adore me, treat me like a princess, queen, whatever you want to call it? Who is going to do that for me going forward? Am I going to find that same type of love? So ultimately, I chose myself. I chose peace. I chose alignment. And that's where it gets hard because there was still love. But like I said, there just wasn't alignment anymore. And that was that fear of, am I going to find somebody else that's going to love me that way? And then, yes, as soon as you put yourself into that healing process of, I love myself, I'm doing work on myself, I know how to heal I did all the work. Not saying that everything within inside me is completely healed, because healing is an ongoing process. You should know that it's always going to process. Okay. More than once, Will. It's always feeling like that things will advance. Exactly. Yes, I know that feeling all too well. I did it for a long time. And there was that hope, right? There was that hope that it was all going to work out. And then it doesn't. So yes, thank you for sharing. All right, you guys. When you think about that person, do you feel peace or do you feel anxiety? And the thing is, that's where it became relevant to me when I was in those relationships was, did I feel peace? I think I had a little bug fly across me. Did I feel peace in this relationship? Or did I feel more anxiety? And I felt less and less peace. I started to feel like every time I didn't have proper communication, and that was like a standard for me. And I always felt like I was ultimately digging for more. And I'm like, why? So that disrupted my peace. And so you got to ask yourself that. Is it bringing you peace or do you feel anxious about it? Because anxiety and love are not the same thing. Rico, are you here? Anxiety and love are not the same thing. Just because you miss them doesn't mean they're meant for you. Okay. So this is where faith enters the conversation, okay? Let me share with you. Because sometimes God allows relationships to end, not because he wants to punish you, but because he wants to protect you. And God sees what we don't see, what we won't see, what we're unwilling to see. Because sometimes God removes people because he loves you too much to let you settle. And there's a lot of different knowings and understandings. And it's so funny because a couple times during my past relationships, there was like those moments where God was like, okay, it's time to move on. And I was like, no, like I wasn't ready, because we want that love, right? We want to feel loved. We want to feel, that security, that feeling, it's a great feeling to be in love, to be with someone and share, but it's also like, not okay when things aren't in alignment with your peace, with how it makes you feel like when you're not together. So it's like, I know God was just like, okay, there's a new direction for you. And I was like, I'm not ready. So I laugh because I've been through this, you guys. And I share from love and empathy, because I understand if you are going through this, I get it. When I think about that person, I feel a knot in my stomach. Yes. When you think about the person, now, okay, you're going to have to share a little bit more. When you think about the person, I feel a knot in my stomach. So when you think about the person that you're in love with, or the person, or like if you're in a relationship, do they make you anxious? Or is that the knot? Like, because there's butterflies, there's butterflies, and then there's the knot in the stomach where it makes you feel anxious. So if you're in a relationship and they're creating more knots than butterflies, there's a problem. And mine was unfortunately creating more knots. So I had to, I had to have that conversation. Okay, so God isn't always taking something from you. Sometimes he's making room for something better. The hardest thing about surrender is trusting God with an outcome that you wanted. So I think that's really important to know, because there was many times where I prayed and I was just like, okay, God, like, tell me like what's going on. I want clarity. I want, this, I want that. And, there were times when I was like trying to negotiate with God. Okay, Rico, the person who, oh yeah. So if you were in a relationship, the person who brought you anxiety so you were in a relationship, they brought you anxiety, a knot in your stomach. That wasn't healthy. It wasn't a healthy relationship. So if you're still in it, there's a few questions that it's coming up at, in a minute for you to reflect on and go over to see if that's something that you need to continue with. See, the thing about relationships is you guys are either going to make it work by going to counseling, or going to some type of marriage or couples counseling and things like that, that you can do for each other. If it's something that's, I want to say, minuscule, meaning like it's just a lack of communication, because the thing is, there's opportunities for both sides where two people can be in this relationship and want to grow together and take that opportunity to do all the things, to make it work. So you got to decide on whether she does bring you peace, and at times, but there's still this anxiety that lingers, because that can be an inner type of conflict that's happening within your body. Because sometimes what happens is it's a direct reflection of something that we're internally dealing with as well. Oh, okay, good. Okay, perfect. Thank you for sharing then. So you're just kind of sharing that that's how she made you feel. Well, good. I'm glad. I'm glad you're going through the process of healing because that's the best thing you could do. Thank you, Rico, for sharing. I appreciate you. Okay, so yeah, I was telling you guys, you ever tried negotiating with God? Like God was telling me one thing, and I'm just like, yeah, but you know, can it be like I really wanted the relationship to work? Can it be this? Does it have to be about them? Can you make it work? So I laugh about it because like I tried negotiating with God to keep, a relationship before, and he just kept showing me things, and I was just like, oh yeah, I didn't want to listen. But I share that with you guys because I get it. I know sometimes we want to stay in relationships because they feel so good, but yet they don't bring you the peace that you truly need, and that's where God is. So faith isn't trusting God when you understand. Faith is trusting God when you don't. Sometimes the ending is God's mercy, even when we don't want to see that. So let's get into a few questions that I want you to sit with. I want you to sit with this. I want you to be reflective of it because it's ultimately helping you through the process of, okay, even if you're in a relationship and maybe these questions are helping you in that process. Okay. Now, granted, I'm not here to tell you, you got to go separate from this person tomorrow. I'm just here to be supportive, to let you know where it's healthy and where it's not. And just know that, there could be a lot of opportunity for growth on both ends. Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and put up the questions on the screen. Where are they? Here we go. Okay, so here's 20 questions that are basically saying, are you staying for the wrong reasons? Okay, here we go. All right, so question number 1. If this relationship stayed exactly as it is today, would I honestly be happy 5 years from now? So that's a question to reflect on. If this relationship stayed exactly as it is today, would I honestly be happy 5 years from now? So reflect on that. Decide if that's something that, like right now, that you're involved in, or whatever it is. And it's like, if you look 5 years ahead and you just think, if you're like automatic is like, no, that's something to look internally at. And then, okay, so number 2, am I in love with who they are or who I hope they will become? So yeah, in one of my past relationships, I was in love with them, but also hoping that they were going to become someone that I was hoping for. Again, no judgment, you guys. Been there, been there, been there, been there, done that. Okay. 3, do I find myself making excuses for behaviors that don't align with my values? So this is interesting because I find that we tend to do that when we don't want to look at the truth. When we don't want to see what's facing us directly in the face, we start to make excuses for their behaviors. And when they don't align with your values, you start to get bothered. But yet, you're still hoping that things change. Okay? 4, am I staying because I genuinely feel fulfilled or because I fear starting over? That was me, you guys. I feared starting over. I really did. It was crazy. it was a process, but I'm glad I don't have that fear anymore. And it's okay. You can genuinely still love the person, wish them the best, and start over. And that's okay. Okay, 5. Do I feel more anxiety than peace in this relationship? We talked about that, you guys. Do I feel more anxiety than peace in this relationship? So, like Rico said, he had knots in his stomach. Not a good sign. If you're constantly feeling this like aches and pain in your stomach, it's not giving you peace, it's giving you chaos. And that's not alignment. Okay, number 6. Have I ignored red flags because I wanted the relationship to work? Have I ignored red flags because I've wanted the relationship to work? So think about that. Now, it's funny because sometimes people look at, depending on where you're at in your growth process and relationships, is we look at red flags differently. Okay. So sometimes people see red flags as like toxicity and things like that. And you can genuinely be in a relationship with someone who's not toxic. But if you red flags come up, meaning that they're not peaceful to who you are as a person and the standards that you have for your life. So that can still be a red flag. So one of them that came up in the past was our communication styles. And one of the things I had said is like from the beginning, like communicate with me, be open, be honest. And yeah, like, whatever we're going through, whatever, just be open and honest. Like I love having a friendship type of relationship with, with a partner. I think that's amazing because like they're ultimately like not necessarily your best friend, but they're like your best friend. You're building something with them, like a future and things like that. So, open and honest communication is key in a strong relationship. Well, what happened was things were going great. And then all of a sudden, this like communication pattern felt very like, I felt like there was misinformation. So it's like, I'm open and honest. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I'm going here, I'm going there. And then there was always this like communication of like, oh, so what's going on tonight? Oh, like it was a little bit skewed, if that makes sense. So it never felt really comfortable with me. And I'm not saying the person was cheating. I'm just saying, as a coach, I know when there's information being withheld, if that makes sense. And so I just said, if I'm not the person like that you want to be open and honest with, I'm not your person. So I think communication is key. So remember that red flags will appear that will show up because they affect your values and your standards and who your partner is supposed to be in your life. So trust, communication is, number one for me. And so if that affects in any way, then it affects the entire relationship, basically. So you got to find out what your red flags are, what's showing up for you. Okay. All right. 7. Am I constantly waiting for potential instead of accepting reality? So it depends where you're at. Are you constantly waiting for them and their potential instead of accepting what's really happening? Yeah, I think, we can do that, subconsciously and consciously. It happens to the best of us because we believe so much in who they are because they're good people, or some of them. Like I mentioned in the beginning, not all relationships end because of toxicity or the person was bad. It's just because there was no longer alignment. So are you waiting for potential instead of accepting reality? And I think that's where a lot of why I stayed in a past relationship for a long time was because I saw the potential. Okay. Do I feel emotionally drained more often than emotionally supported? And I think this one hit me. When this one hit me, that's when I knew that there was no longer alignment. So I was starting to feel emotionally drained versus emotionally supported. So for me, it all happened through miscommunication, or lack thereof, I should say. So I was feeling this emotional drain because of how important communication and trust for me was. You know what I mean? So you got to ask yourself, like, is it emotionally draining? Like Rico said, he had knots in his stomach. Or were you emotionally supportive, you know? So there were bouts of it. But for the most part, I always felt like I wasn't fully supported in that relationship. Okay, 9. Am I afraid that I won't find someone else? I remember going through this in a past relationship, you know? But yeah, no, I don't feel that anymore. And that's great. You know what I mean? Never settle. Never settle. You have to find your person, the one who's going to be in alignment with who you are and the love that you give. Spiritually, too. You guys find someone who chases God as much as you do. That's so powerful. Never be afraid. When you find the love within, that love will find you. Okay, 10. Have I compromised important values just to keep the relationship? Yep. I remember, actually, it's so funny that I had mentioned find someone who's going to chase God as much as you. I compromised my faith, hoping that they would come around. Now, granted, it's not that they didn't believe, it's just that they weren't involved the way I was. So, like, I want somebody who's going to church with me, who's, reading the word with me. I want somebody who's, showing up that's faithful and loving and, all of that. So, faithful in God's name, right? So, yeah, find out where you're at in there. Okay, 11. Do I feel fully seen, heard, and understood by this person? Do you feel fully seen, heard, and understood by this person? So basically, where your values come up, when you communicate, is the person actually receiving what you're sharing with them? Are you being understood? Are they taking actions to make it better, to correct it? Things like that. I mean, ultimately, in a past relationship, I ended things because although they were understanding and took to my needs and understood me as a person, nothing really changed, if that made sense. They were empathetic and understanding, but where I was hoping that things would change, never did. And it just became more of I'm basically asking them to be a completely different person. And that's not fair. That's not fair to them. That's not fair to me. And it's like, it's not fair to them. And where it's not fair to me because I would be holding myself back. Does that make sense? So I hope that you understand that process. Okay. 12. Am I staying because of the history we've built rather than the future we're creating? That's a really good one too, because we get so comfortable with someone and, we have, we laugh together, we feel, excited and, the plans you've talked about and the future you wanted to have together. And it's created this history between you guys. And, but ultimately, all the red flags or all the misalignments are coming through that process. And now you're a little hesitant about whether or not you're moving forward with that person. Am I staying because of the history we've built rather than the future we're creating? So the person that you're building a future with should have everything in alignment with who and what you're becoming, who God has positioned you to be. Okay. Do I keep hoping for a version of them that hasn't consistently shown up? Oh, that goes back to what I was talking about. It's the potential. It's the potential in them that you see. Do I keep hoping for a version of them that hasn't consistently shown up? You know, they can be a good person and understand your needs, your wants, but still not know how to show up as the person that you envision. Okay? I know this is rough, you guys. It's rough sometimes to like face this. Am I afraid of disappointing them if I choose myself? And yeah, I remember that when I went through the process of ending that previous relationship. I remember, you know, I remember not wanting to hurt them, like, because you care for them, you love them, you've built, you know, time with them. You've talked about memories, you've talked about a future. I mean, about, future opportunities with them. And I remember, it is a feeling of disappointing them. Like, you don't want to hurt them, if that makes sense. But what I've come to realize, is that, as somebody who can communicate, and I'm not I almost want to say I'm not the best communicator when my emotions are involved. I work well communicating with like my coaching clients. I'm able to communicate with them okay. But for me, when I'm like in the emotional arena, I take a little bit longer for me to process the emotions and my thoughts and what I'm going to say. But it ultimately will revolve around, you know, love and compassion and purpose and understanding and alignment for each other, so there's no resentment, there's only love. And it just, however the other person takes it is on them, not on you. And that's what you got to be okay with. It's you're choosing you, and it's not your fault with how they react. Okay. So you can give them the love and through the conversation, and want the best for them, and still be okay with moving on. Now, granted, not going to say it's not going to hurt. It's not going to be easy. But it's a process that you go through, and you work through your emotions in that process. Okay. Do I trust them, or am I constantly questioning what is true? So I feel like this is where I may have landed too in my previous. Do I trust them, or am I constantly questioning what is true? And the only reason I lost that trust was because of the lack of communication. So I know I mentioned it previously, but it was just the lack of communication. Like, I knew they were holding something back, but why? And so when I ended the relationship, I basically said, I want you to be with someone you can be open and honest with and share everything with, instead of holding back. Because the person that you find is going to be your person. When you get excited to share your day, when you get excited to, have that conversation of what you're up to, what you're doing, and all the things, that's your person. You're going to be excited to share, And so, yeah, there was just that constant of that uneasy feeling of like, I'm not their person. So yeah, do I trust them, or am I constantly questioning what is true? I think I was constantly questioning what is true, because I knew that I wasn't the one, if that makes sense, And as sad as it was kind of hurtful. It was just time for me to move on. Okay. Am I trying to save, fix, heal, or change this person? Good question. Am I trying to save, fix, heal, or change this person? And I think this question will reflect a lot upon where you're at in either the relationship or how long you stayed in it. And again, no judgment. Been there. I was with somebody for 9 years. I was with somebody for 5 years. So am I trying to save, fix, heal, change the person? I remember I was always that person. Like I was always that person. Like I can fix them or I can help them, if that makes sense. But it's like, you can't, because they need to help themselves. They need to show up for themselves. You can't do that for them. So a lot of women, we're nurturers. So of course we feel like, oh, we can fix, save, or change this person, so that they can adapt to somebody that you want them to be. But ultimately it's who they are. And it's like, if, they stay in that same space, then that's just who they are. And you get to be okay with that. You get to bless and release and know that it just wasn't meant to be. And that's okay. Have I become smaller, quieter, or less myself in order to maintain the relationship? Ooh, that's a good one. Because people do. People change who they are to stay in a relationship because they feel like they're not going to get any better. That's not okay. Be who you are. Don't become smaller. Don't become quieter or less yourself. You want to be who you are. Grow together, or work on growing who you are yourself, investing into you and becoming a better person every single day. That's what I strive to do. Like, I'm always looking to self-develop. Like, I'm always either on podcasts or I'm listening to, or I'm reading a book, or I'm getting coaching advice. You know what I mean? So I'm always evolving. And so if that person decides to stay where they're at and you're evolving, it just becomes a misalignment. But if you guys are willing to work on it and to grow together, then a relationship can work. So don't ever, make yourself smaller, quieter, or be less yourself in order to maintain a relationship and make it work. Definitely not. Because God didn't ask you to do that. He didn't ask you to hide under the desk. He told you you are the light that is put up upon a desk to shine for others to see. Matthew 5:14. All right. Does this relationship bring me closer to the woman God is calling me to become? There you go. There's your follow-up question. Does this relationship bring me closer to the woman or man God is calling me to become? Because God will never ask you to lessen yourself. Never. He will always ask you for the greater good, to help others, to shine, to be obedient, to be someone who's going to spread the good news in his honor. I'm a child of God. So remember, you were meant to be here. You were meant to spread your wings. You were meant to shine for others to see. You were meant to inspire. So never lessen who you are to save a relationship. You are so worthy of more. All right. If my daughter's son, sister, or best friend were in the exact relationship, would I encourage them to stay? No. No. And the thing about me is, like, anytime I hear relationship advice from people, who are in it, who are going through it, I can give advice. I can give a understanding of where the both relationships are. But I also know that when whoever's in the relationship, when they're done, they're done. Nobody else can tell them anything. Nobody else can say, oh, you need to leave, you need to this, you need to that. It is up to the person who's in the relationship to determine when they're done with the relationship. So you got to ask yourself, if any of these people were in a similar relationship, would I encourage them to stay? Yeah, it all depends on where you're at in that process. But In my past relationship, I wouldn't have. Okay, last question. Deep down, if fear wasn't involved, what decision would I make today? And you guys, your subconscious knows it automatically right off the bat. I don't have to dive into this. We all know, if we've watched the previous episode, Love or Attachment, your attachment styles. If you have or rank up to any of those attachment styles, then you'll understand the fear involved. So if fear wasn't involved, what decision would I make today? You got to ask yourself that. Okay? Know that you are worthy of good things. You're worthy of loving who you are so that you can attract the love that is meant for you. And if you're listening today or tonight and you're grieving someone, I want you to hear me. You can love someone and still let them go. You can care deeply and still choose yourself. You can appreciate what they brought into your life and still know they aren't your future. So love was never the problem. Peace became the priority, and compatibility matters, and so does alignment. Because God's plan matters. And the final question I have for you guys is, what if letting go wasn't a failure? What if it was an act of self-respect? What if it was an act of faith? And the thing is, you'll understand the two, because the self-respect, the act of self-respect is loving you enough to know that it just wasn't in alignment anymore. And then the act of faith is choosing the faith over fear component. Knowing that you are meant to align with somebody who's meant to be with you in the future. And even if it's the person you had to get out of the relationship with, I had a friend of mine who dated somebody when he was, I want to say in high school, early college days, and they were just not compatible. They fought, everything, you name it. They broke up. He did his own thing. 10 years later, I run into him and they reconnected. They're now married with kids. And I love that for them. So you just never know where you're going to find love again. It could, in actuality, be with the one person that you had to let go so that they could become the person that you're meant to spend the rest of your life with. But you'll never know until you choose you first. Okay? So if this message spoke to you tonight, comment the word peace. You guys, give me peace. And remember that every relationship ends because not every relationship ends because there wasn't love. Sometimes love wasn't the problem. I want you to pause and understand that there was a reason, there was an alignment, and you were meant for more. So until next time, you guys, let me know if you have any questions. Hit me up on social media, send me an email. Let me know what our next topic is going to be. I'm excited to share with you all next week. Okay, so until then, I will see you guys next week. Thank you for joining live. I appreciate you. Again, let me know if you joined me live or you caught this on replay, and I will see you all soon. Okay, take care and be blessed. Bye.